Well, good morning and welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network. I'm Jeff Snyder, and this is BRN AM for Wednesday, January 8th, 2020. And here are our top stories. What is the most important financial move you can make in 2020? And the unhealthy extreme of early retirement. Well, 2020 is here. What is the most important financial move you can make early this year? Join me now, Mari Backman, personal finance reporter with The Motley Fool. Mari, Happy New Year. Great to have you back on the program.
Happy New Year. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well. Good to see you. As always, been a little bit of time, I think, since Thanksgiving, but I know you're busy with finishing up last minute articles and the family. So great to have you on in 2020. Let's jump right in. I know you just recently wrote a story called The Most Important Financial Move You Can Make. And, it's January, New Year's resolutions. What can you tell us about the most important financial move that I should make, that we should make?
So there's a lot of different important moves you could make, like boosting your IRA or 401k, paying off debt. But I think the most important thing to do this year is build an emergency fund if you don't have one already. Very important.
And so, obviously there's a lot of priorities that people have. And at some point, people can kind of feel like an ostrich. You just want to bury your head in the sand and just not think about all the crazy things. But when it comes to student loan debt, when it comes to IRAs, you're saying the emergency savings is the most important. Why is that?
Okay, so here's the deal. You don't have emergency savings. If you don't have some money in the bank to tackle unplanned bills or maybe a period of unemployment, because you never know what might happen, you're basically going to be in a situation where you're stuck taking on more debt, or you face other unfortunate consequences when those scenarios come to be and you don't have that safety net of money in the bank to fall back on. So a lot of people ask me, well, if I have $47 in my savings account, but I also owe $2,000 on this credit card that's charging me 15% interest, why shouldn't I pay that off first? And my answer is, well, sure, you should try to pay it off as quickly as possible. But imagine you come into an extra $500 and instead of putting it in the bank, you use it to pay down that debt. That's great. But then what happens if a $500 unplanned bill lands in your lap the next week? Then you might be looking at charging it on a card that's going to slap you with an 18% interest rate. Or even if you're paying, a similar interest rate, you're basically just right back to square one. And that assumes also that, you have the option to charge future expenses. People max out their credit limits or in certain situations, like you might have no more money left on your credit card, you may be unable to get a loan, and you might risk falling behind on a mortgage payment if you don't have some money in the bank. And let's say your hours get cut at work, or maybe you even, lose your job and it takes you a couple of months to find another one. So that's why I'm a firm believer that you need that safety net. And what I like to tell people is try to sock away at least 3 months of essential living expenses. So, if you typically spend $3,000 a month on living costs, but maybe $800 of that is your gym membership, your cable bill, the restaurant you like to go to every Friday night. You don't necessarily have to budget in for those things, because if you were really in that dire scenario of not having an income, you could always cut those things out. But you can't just not pay your mortgage. You need, or rent. You can't not have a place to live. You can't just say, all right, well, I won't make my car payment. Well, if your car gets repossessed, you have no way to get to work. You're stuck in that situation even longer. So it's essential living expenses that you're totaling, but I would say at least 3 months worth. And then honestly, more like 6 months worth if maybe you own a home and a car and you've got kids and you're the sole breadwinner in your family. Personally, I like to have more like 9 months worth of expenses in my savings account, because the way I see it, I just have so many potential disasters in my life, Jeff. I don't like to think of it that way, right? But I'm a klutz. I could hurt myself. I have a 3-story home, and within that home, a number of things could go wrong on any given day. My husband and I, between the two of us, we each have a vehicle, so we own 2 vehicles. They're not new vehicles, so there's the potential for car repairs, for issues like that. little kids who you never know when they, go running around and slam their head into something and need an ER visit. I mean, you hope it doesn't happen, but the way I see it, you always have to be prepared. And for me also, because I'm an independent contractor, I don't get vacation time through my job, through any of my jobs. So that if I need time off, let's say to, care for a child who, God forbid, breaks his leg, or, or if whatever, school's out for a period of time and I can't find childcare, so maybe my income takes a little dip. I mean, there's all these scenarios where, it never hurts to have extra money. So I like to be extra cautious. I don't know that the average person needs 9 months of living expenses, but those 3 months worth, definitely.
Well, I think there are many Americans who are in the situations you and I and others are in, which is we go through highs and lows. We have things that come up. It's important to be able to set yourself apart and be financially independent. That should be a goal for everyone, I personally believe. And, setting aside some money first for those emergency expenses is a great starting point. And Mari, you can't underestimate what you don't know is going to happen. And that is extremely important. And God forbid something happens to the children in terms of falling down, scraping their knees, whatever. But you've got to be prepared to step in and go to the doctor and do these other things.
We've had in my household, we've had what my husband and I jokingly through tears like to call $1,000 days, where we've had a couple of random days in the past number of years where we've had some unplanned bill or something pop up where it's been easily $1,000 in one day alone. Once it was an issue with our car, combined with 3 sick kids the very same day. So it was 3 last-minute urgent care doctor's appointments at like $40 or $50 a pop for copays. And that very same day, we had to do a major repair to my car. And then another time we had an issue with our home where a pipe burst in our basement. And they had to basically come in and refit a whole bunch of piping and whatnot. And that was easily $1,000. And I mean, it's a lot of money to spend in one day. So.
Absolutely. I think it is. And I want to ask you, let's put aside the finances for a second. Let's talk about coping, because people deal with issues and things in many different ways. But when you have something come at you like you just described, which is car repairs, children, these $1,000 days, how do you cope with that? What is your strategy in particular? Is it deep breaths? I mean, we're all different, but how do you deal with that? I mean, that is emotionally very challenging and can set people back.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I might get a little down especially if it's a period where I've been really good about being a little more frugal, maybe haven't been spending as much on takeout, haven't really been doing much unnecessary shopping, and I'm doing so well, and then bam, a $600, household maintenance item or repair comes up. It can be depressing. I'll say though that having emergency savings for me makes it at least not stressful. I might get a little down, but I'm not sitting there going, well, how on earth am I going to pay this bill now? Or what other big changes am I going to have to make now to compensate? That's another reason why I need to have a higher level of emergency savings than most people, I think, because I don't enjoy stress. And maybe I don't even deal that well with stress. So by having that extra money in the bank, it takes the stress part out of the equation. And then what I do is, okay, I dip into that emergency fund, I pay whatever the bill is, and then I just work on trying to slowly but surely replenish it, which frankly, I'm usually free to take my time to do because I like to have 9 months worth of expenses in the bank, really knowing that I'm probably okay to have 6 months worth. A little less. Sorry,
we've got about 45 seconds left. How important is it to have a partner in your husband to discuss these issues and to pick each other up when you have these days? I got to imagine it's really important. I know I'm married. I love talking to my spouse about these things, but you pick each other up, right?
You pick each other up. You also get on the same page and you support each other in your savings endeavors, because the truth is, if you're in a partnership or a relationship, it's a dual effort. It's a joint effort to build savings, and you definitely need your partner's buy-in on that.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm reminded of the Grateful Dead song, Uncle John's Band, "When life looks like easy street, there is danger at your door," and how true that is. Mari, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk to Mari about some of the challenges from a health perspective on early retirement. Stay tuned right here on BRN AM. Imagine a new television network that will make you richer, healthier, and in control of your financial future. This network is for the policewoman in Nashville, Tennessee, the baker in Dubuque, Iowa, the teacher in Lexington, Kentucky. We want to make the idea of savings and retirement culturally relevant. But what do you see as a defining issue of the midterms? Especially for the smaller businesses. I mean, they are the lifeblood of the American economy. Featuring exclusive interviews, current affairs, and docuseries. 33 years old, you retired early.
The philosophy is money only matters if it helps you live a life that you love.
But you got to start thinking about retirement as soon as you get in.
The Broadcast Retirement Network will drive very high engagement with premium partnerships. So this isn't retirement and savings for your parents or grandparents. This is for all Americans. And we're going to change the way you think about money. Welcome to the next frontier of retirement and savings. This is BRN, the Broadcast Retirement Network. Welcome back. You know, we've talked about the financially independent retire early movement, or FIRE, but is retiring early actually an unhealthy extreme? We're talking to Mari Backman, personal finance reporter with The Motley Fool, and also someone helping me cope with financial matters. Mari, thanks so much for staying with us again this morning. Happy New Year again to you and your family.
Happy New Year. I'm always there for you, Jeff. Always
there.
Yeah,
I appreciate that. And I'm reminded of the song I'll Be There For You, which was the theme song for Friends. Let's talk about the unhealthy extremes of trying to retire early. I know you did a piece on this. This is really important information because you don't want to shorten your lifespan by retiring early.
Right. So, you know, there's two types of early retirement. There's the early retirement with those people who maybe leave the workforce at 58 or 59 or 62, you know, a little bit ahead of schedule. And I'm a big advocate of that. What I'm actually talking about here, though, is very early retirement. People who, you know, you hear these stories, people leave the workforce, they retire at age 38 or 40 or 43. Maybe they just, you know, have this great business idea that really takes off and they cash it out and they make millions. And then you have a lot of just regular everyday people who are managing to retire very early. They're attaining financial independence by living really frugally and saving a lot of money. And while that's great and all, the trend kind of disturbs me in a certain way, Jeff, because you read these stories about people and you see what they're doing to retire in their 40s instead of retiring, you know, maybe 15 years later. And a lot of that to me just seems not only somewhat unrealistic, but just wholly unpleasant. So I'll give you an example.
Okay.
I read a story recently of a couple. They retired at like age 38 or 39, and they did so by, they were both independent contractors. They banked a lot of their income. They did so by living out of their car for like the last 3 years or so. And they had like these, these internet cards where they could like work from anywhere, or maybe they paid for Wi-Fi at, at coffee shops or whatnot. And they were able to get by without having to pay for a home. And sure, obviously, I know how much I pay to put a roof over my family's head. I mean, we would save a whole lot of money if we were to just pile into my minivan and live in it instead. But, I'm not a particularly spoiled person. I'm a girl who's, gone camping for a week and lived in the woods. But Jeff, I can't imagine living in my car for 3 years when I don't absolutely have to because of financial reasons. And that's where I'm going with this very early retirement thing. You just see a lot of people making these really extreme sacrifices. And while I suppose there's nothing wrong with it, if that's really what you want, it's just something I have a hard time getting on board with.
I think if you can do something like that, if you have to over the short term. But I go back to Mari, and I think you're describing the FIRE movement, financial independence, retire early movement, which I do think is very extreme. And certainly it isn't for everyone. I mean, you have to use extreme techniques in order to sock away money. especially if you're a younger person and you're not, you don't have the earning potential that you would when you get into a more mature age, into your 50s and into your 60s. I think what I have read about this, I want to get your sense on this, is that millennials who do this, we actually have seen the mortality rate of individuals who are of the millennial age actually narrow or shorten. They don't have the same mortality. So for the first time, mortality in this country has contracted, not expanded. I certainly agree with you. I think that's heading in the completely wrong direction. We want to live longer, have those experiences, but doing things that are unhealthy, that's not going to benefit anybody, including yourself and your loved ones.
Yeah, and one thing that a lot of people are cutting back on too is healthcare. Now, with the individual mandate, going away, it's like, you could just say, well, I'm a reasonably healthy, single 32-year-old person, so I'm not going to get health insurance. Or people skimp on healthcare all the time. They skip diagnostic tests because, they're trying to save all this money and they don't want to, pay those deductibles or copays. And to be clear and fair, there's a large percentage of Americans who skimp on healthcare because they genuinely can't afford it. But I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about people who really just take frugal living to what I find to be just an unreasonable extreme. The story that I just read, I don't think the couple in question had kids. But you do read these stories about families with kids who are retiring very early. And it's like, wait, so you're retiring at age 40 when your kids are 10 and 8 and 6. And what are you doing for health care? Are you going without health care? What happens when one of your kids gets sick? How are you doing this? It's a little scary.
Yeah, and the thing that I think a lot of people don't estimate, and even when you're a retiree, you have to think about market conditions, right? I mean,
Right.
Today we're talking, and there have been volatility in the market the last year or so, up and down, up and down, up and down. What's that going to mean to your retirement nest egg? So if you are someone who's retired at age 32 or 38, I think that's great. But you also have to think about not only your mortality, but how much money are you going to have? How are you going to ride out those markets? Do you have the emergency savings, going back to our first segment, to ride out the market volatility? I think a lot of people miss that. I think it almost is like a game, Mari. It's like playing Pokemon.
That's one of my kids' favorite. Yeah, maybe it's playing Frogger with your life. I mean, I don't know, but when I hear people talk about wanting to retire very early, one of the first things I like to ask them is, how's your job? Do you enjoy your job? Do you get satisfaction from your job? And most of the time when I have these conversations about very early retirement, the response is, no, I hate my job.
Yeah.
No, I can't wait to quit. And that also drives a lot of people's decision to retire very early. So to that, I would say, if you're miserable at work, find better work or find lower paying work if that's what it takes to make that work meaningful and make it something you don't hate doing. But I think to give up the financial security of a paycheck and quite potentially employer-sponsored health insurance, at age 40, to me, that's, again, it's a little too scary for me.
Well, I think for some it could be very scary. For others, it could be rewarding. And I think you're right. If you're not happy, a lot of people can do this to bridge to another vocation, right? If you are an artist and you can't make ends meet doing art, but you are still working towards that goal, you can take a job and do that. You don't have to be married to the job. And as I always tell people, I kind of think of myself as constantly evolving. And so, I started in my career in the financial services industry, was a record keeper, technologist, consultant, and now I'm doing this. And who would have thought? But I keep on evolving. And you gain that financial independence. You put money away to put yourself in a better position to achieve those objectives. And only you, as an individual, know what those objectives are.
Right, exactly. And I think, the whole thing about very early retirement, too, is people's goal is, well, I want to retire very early because I want to enjoy life. I don't want to work. I want to enjoy life. But then you see these extreme sacrifices people are making they're the opposite of enjoying life. They're actually, you're torturing yourself, and that's not always the case. But again, I can't get that story of the couple who lived out of their compact car for 3 years out of my head. And it's like, I just can't see doing something like that to then be able to say, okay, well, I'm doing this so that I don't have to lift a finger at age 40 or 41. Well, why don't you not live out of your car for 3 years? Why don't you live in a really cheap home and maybe retire at 45 instead of 41, or live in a home and maybe instead of retiring at 40 or 41, you find something you really enjoy doing and you do it, part-time, something like that.
And I think the story is not written on this because I think, 5, 10, 20 years down the road, we'll be revisiting these individuals to see how life is. And I think we'll learn. Were they successful? Where did they make mistakes? And, again, not for everybody. Mari,
there's definitely the unretirement flip side of the FIRE movement.
Absolutely. I think people need to take that into account. Mari, always a pleasure talking with you. I know that you're there for me and for the audience as well. Happy New Year, and we'll talk to you again very soon.
Sounds great, Jeff. Take care.
And that wraps up this episode of BRN AM. Hey, have a financial topic or someone of interest that you think we should interview? Drop us a line. And don't forget, for all the news in retirement markets, technology, personal finance, so much more, check out today's edition of The Morning Pulse. So until tomorrow, I'm Jeff Snyder. Keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.